Okay, ready to go?
Ready when you
Let's
are.
get the show on the road, Scott. Good talking Oklahoma State football again with you. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. Glad to do it,
All
man.
right, big difference from last year to this year at this time. And yet, what a season. An incredible season. Everything really worked out almost as good as the staff and the fans could have hoped. Unfortunately, it ended the way that it did in the Big 12 championship game. So that leaves a bitter taste. Still, it was exciting to see them rebound with the comeback win in the bowl game. That had to help. But there's a lot of new players on this team this season, and that includes a new defensive coordinator. So a lot of changes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a unique season in that they're coming off a great defensive performance. Now they've got to change at defensive coordinator. Most of the back seven of the secondary and linebackers are new. I say they've got 1.5 returning starters in that group. But yeah, Derek Mason takes over the defense. It was an interesting transition because he came in and learned the terminology that they had been using under Jim Knowles rather than the other way around, where he was teaching them a new defense, new terminology, all of those things. Obviously, the defense is going to have his fingerprints all over it, but schematically, it's going to look very similar. It's just going to be, his tendencies will be different than Jim Knowles were. He's simplified some things for some of the new guys that are coming into starting roles so that they can adapt a little bit quicker. But for the most part, it's going to look very similar, and they hope to get similar results. Obviously,
Well, I guess let's go ahead and start with the defense then, because this is definitely, like you said, with the amount of players they lost. But up front on the defensive line, or at least on the edges, this is the strength. This is, I would think, the strength of the team. Colin Oliver's back, Brock Martin's back, Tyler Lacey's back. That's as good as a 3 defensive end look that you're going to have in all of college football.
yeah, absolutely. And they bring back Trace Ford, who was out last year with an injury and was a part-time starter, really their most talented defensive end his freshman and sophomore years. So he was really Martin for that starting job, uh, and then missed. He's had 2 ACLs, so obviously there's some big question marks about whether he's going to have that quick twitch speed that made him such a difference maker in his first step off the line. But at the same time, he's an experienced guy, definitely a very talented athlete. So you add him into the mix with Colin Oliver and Brock Martin, Tyler Lacey on the other side. They're doing some interesting things with Tyler Lacey because they feel they've got so much depth at defensive end. They're shifting him inside. He's 6'4", 295, so he's athletic enough and strong enough to move in and play on the inside a little bit, get another defensive end with some additional speed on the field, and they feel they can make that defensive line even more dangerous with some of those mixtures. And they've got a lot of versatility on that group. They led the country with 55 sacks last year. Only lost a couple of guys at defensive tackle. Israel Antoine went to the NFL. Jaden Jernigan transferred to Missouri, but they've still got a couple of guys that are super seniors coming back. Brendan Everett on AIC.
Okay,
They're going to be their start, and they've got some depth behind them and guys that have a little bit of experience and are guys that they're really excited about. So that defensive line is where they're really banking on those guys to give the back end some time to develop because they know that that defensive front is going to be really dangerous.
yeah. So you mentioned a couple of those guys inside. Is there one guy that is ahead of another, or is it pretty much a rotation? And like we talked about, the star guys would be on the edges. Is there someone inside though that we should keep an eye on?
It's an interesting because they've got the guys that I mentioned with Evers and Asi at those 2 tackle spots they're veteran guys. Like I said, super seniors. Evers is a 6th-year senior, been in the program his entire career. Samuel Atui Halamaka is behind them. He's a 5th-year senior that has been a rotational guy pretty much the majority of his career. So he's had a lot of experience. Those guys are just really solid. When you start looking for difference makers, it's young guys and new guys coming up that they think have a chance to be really impactful. A guy like Colin Clay, an Oklahoma City boy who went to Arkansas for his freshman year, played a decent amount as a true freshman at Arkansas, decided he wasn't happy there, transfers to Oklahoma State. He's been riddled with injuries the last 2 years, hasn't gotten on the field yet.
Okay.
But at 6'3", 300 pounds and very athletic, he was a defensive end in high school, a guy coming off the edge, but has bulked up and can be a difference maker, they think, in a rotational spot. And Aiden Kelly was a true freshman last year who got in enough, not so much to burn his red shirt, but got in enough to build some experience for this year. So those are a couple of young or inexperienced guys that they think could really help to boost the veterans that are in that group.
Okay. So let's talk about the linebacking unit, because this is definitely a big question with the loss of Malcolm Rodriguez and also Devin Harper. If you want to put McAllister in there as well, you can do that. But losing Rodriguez and Harper, especially Rodriguez, is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody that's been watching Hard Knocks on HBO knows what kind of splash Rodriguez is making at the next level as a 6th-round draft pick. They're very excited about him in Detroit. So, the loss of there's only 4 guys in the history of Oklahoma State football to have over 400 career tackles, and he's one of those guys. So, it's a definite big loss. Devin Harper is another guy that got drafted, even though he was only started as a super senior, his first chance to start, his 6th year in the program. But a veteran guy in that unit that really helped them excel last year. And you've got to replace those 2 spots. They only play 2 linebackers in this defense,
Okay.
with an inside guy and an outside guy. So they're looking at some inexperienced guys in that group. Mason Cobb is a guy who's been around a while. He's a junior, going into his 3rd year in the program, and they feel excited about what he can do, but he just hasn't had the seasoning to really know for sure what he's going to be like on Saturdays when he's out there, for 60 or 70 snaps. So he's stepping into that inside spot. On the outside, they're really excited about Xavier Benson. He's a guy who back in 2019 as a redshirt freshman was a starter for 10 games at Texas Tech. So he's got some Big 12 experience. He's a guy that's been around a while. He opted out of the 2020 season, the COVID year, and then ended up at Tyler Junior College down in Texas for his redshirt sophomore season last year, and led JUCO in tackles. So he's a guy with some good speed and a knack for getting to the ball that they really hope will help fill that void of Malcolm Rodriguez's old spot. So it's one of those things. Derek Mason made the Moneyball reference. You're not gonna replace them with guys that are identical to them. You're gonna have to do it in a collective form, and they feel like they've got a group of guys that are going to be able to step in and help as best can fill that void. It's not going to be easy, and it's the biggest question mark on this defense for sure. But they like the guys that they've got.
They also lost 3 key players in the secondary, and again, not easy to replace. 2 corners and a safety, and these guys, I mean, had high accolades last season. So again, going to be tough to produce. So now Jason Taylor returns. Name-wise, he's like the big name that comes back. But what about the kid Muhammad, the corner, and also Daniels, the safety? They, from what I hear, they seem to be high on those guys. Is that the case? Are they potential breakout candidates?
Yeah, they absolutely. Kendall Daniels for sure. He's a guy at 6'4" and about 200 pounds that was he was a 4-star recruit, a guy that they were really excited to land. He had originally committed to Texas A&M. Some things got sideways down there, and he finds his way to Stillwater. They were very excited to bring him in. He was a guy that thought he was going to come in and play last year. But once he got on campus and realized all the veterans that were ahead of him, he realized that wasn't going to happen. But he has that mentality that he was going to come in and win a job as soon as possible, and he's really done that. So you put him, like you mentioned, Jason Taylor it was just a huge playmaker for this team last year. You go back to the most important plays that this defense made, and he was involved in several of them. He blocks potential game-winning field goal for Boise State. in the final minute in that game. He has a pick six against Texas that Texas was trying to go up 24-3 early in that game. They were driving. He goes 85 on a pick six that completely flipped that game, and they rally for the win. So he just has a knack for being around the ball. Thomas Harper is a guy, Devin Harper's younger brother, similar situation. He's been around a long time. He's only started one game. He's played in 35 games in his career, only started one, but he's a guy that has a lot of experience, and they slide him into that kind of nickel corner, that slot corner guy.
And that's where who was it? I just mentioned him before. That's where McAllister was, right?
And McAllister was playing that spot, and they feel like Harper can really help out there. And then you mentioned Jabbar Muhammad is a guy that you look at and you don't see big time corner, but because he's only 5'10", 5'11". But he is a lockdown guy. And then Corey Black on the other side, at the other corner, is a guy that they're really excited about. He's got more the prototypical NFL cornerback body, but is also a really talented player. And both of those guys played a decent amount against Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. So they're excited about the experience that they got last year and where they can go this year.
Who do you think has a higher ceiling than in both spots, at corner and at safety, out of the players you mentioned?
I think you look at safety, and there's just so much talent. Harper was a corner originally, moved to that slot corner spot. That really helps him there. Taylor's such a gifted playmaker, and then Daniels is the most highly regarded recruit of the group.
Okay.
So I think they're going to be really solid at corner, but I think they've got some special players at safety.
Okay, let's now switch over to offense, and Spencer Sanders has been there for a little bit. Big year last year, but there's still, you look at it and it's not pretty when your career ratio is 50-31. That's usually not very good, but he ran the ball well. He does that, which is a big asset in college. So what about Spencer Sanders? Does he have 2 more years left or just 1?
He's got 2 more. If he wants that COVID year, he could be a 5-year starter at Oklahoma State.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens there. But last year you mentioned the career touchdown interception ratio. Last year he took a real significant step forward. He had 2 really bad games. He threw 3 picks in the first time they played Baylor in early October. Threw 4 picks in the Big 12 championship game when they lose by 5 points.
So Baylor.
Other than that. It was really good. You take out those 7 interceptions, he had a great year. But he took a real step forward in consistency. He had a long stretch of games where he had just 1 interception thrown. So he hadn't had 2 back-to-back games without an interception in his entire career until last year. So he did take a pretty significant step forward in his consistency in maintaining the offense, keeping the ball on their side. So that's real important, that he needs to take another step in that part of his game. But when you combine his knowledge of the offense, the increased talent at receiver, and his ability to run the ball, which they've got to protect him a little bit because they don't have any experience behind him if he gets hurt. But he's so much more impactful when he runs the ball. You look at that Fiesta Bowl against Notre Dame, he rushed for 125 yards and threw for 371, threw 51 passes. So, that was a big part of them being able to rally, was what he did rushing the football. So, he's a veteran guy that really understands this offense inside and out now. Early in his career, they were shuffling through our offensive coordinators. Now he's going into his 3rd year with Casey Dunn as his OC and with Tim Rattay as his quarterback's coach, and that has really helped him.
And if there is a guy to keep an eye on, if there's an injury, or next year, depending, who knows, another year of experience for a couple of these kids, including the coach's son. So we know the coach's son is there, and also Garrett Rangel. So he was a pretty high recruit for them this past year, correct?
Yeah. Really came in early, got in spring ball, which was very important. And like you said, Spencer might be the starter again next year. So they might have another year to try to build some of this talent. They're really excited about the kid they've got in the 23 class, Zane Flores, out of Nebraska. So they've got some guys coming along. But in the present, Garrett Rangel and Gunnar Gundy are battling for the backup job, and that's an important spot because, like I said,
Yes.
Spencer Sanders likes to run. He's had some injury issues over his career. He's essentially missed 7 games over 3 years, so and at least one every. So there's a good chance that one of those two guys is going to be in a position where they've got to go make plays in a meaningful situation. And I mean, they don't have any experience right now. You're not sure what you've got. Gundy's only a redshirt freshman. He got in mop up time in one game last year. Rangel's a true freshman who's only been on campus since January. So they've got to work. They're really happy with what they've seen, but it's very different when you get out there on a Saturday night.
Sure. Absolutely. So, well, hopefully, that's something that Oklahoma State won't have to worry about until Sanders decides to leave.
Yeah.
Fans like Sanders is because again, there's a lot of ups and downs with Sanders. I'm sure he's has some highs and lows with the fans as well.
Oh, absolutely. He's a very polarizing player, especially the last couple of years when Shane Illingworth was his backup, because Illingworth had come in and won some games when Sanders had been hurt. He was a very different type of player, a pocket passer, big 6'6", 230 type of guy that wasn't going to take off and run a lot. So the offense changed a little bit with him in there, but he was a guy that has some arm talent and got fans excited. And when Sanders hit those rough patches and threw a couple of picks, the haters came out pretty quick. Yeah. So it was an interesting situation, but he's weathered that storm. He's still a very polarizing player. There are a lot of fans that are just ready for his career to be over, but
yeah.
But he's a talented guy, and he has shown that he can win big games.
Okay, now the running back situation, big loss with Warren. We saw what kind of loss that was in the Big 12 title game.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of guys coming back. You've got a couple of key recruits coming in here. Actually, Richardson is the top guy returning. Brown and Gordon are the top 2 recruits coming in. And then the transfer comes in, Jackson. So
yes.
Is that your top 4? And if so, is there anybody that is looking like they're the number 1 guy yet?
There's Richardson for sure has the top spot locked down. He's he's a junior. He's been a guy that they've gone to on occasion to be an every down type of back. Not a ton. He's only had 4 games in his career where he's had double-digit carries. I'm trying to paint him like he's got a ton of experience, but he's a guy that they like his running style. They like his blocking ability. They like his knowledge of the offense, and he's ahead of all the other guys in those areas. Jaden Nixon is a redshirt freshman. That's a smaller guy that got some experience last year. Was still able to redshirt, but had a couple of exciting plays that got the fans excited. So he's in the mix there at that number 2 spot. Deandre Jackson is a bigger guy, the Texas A&M transfer. Not a ton of experience. He's had 3 carries over 2 years at Texas A&M, but about a 220-pound guy at 5'11". Very bulky compared to the rest of the guys in the running back room. But then, Ollie Gordon and CJ Brown, the 2 true freshmen, both came in January, both very talented. Ollie Gordon, they list him at 6'1", 210, and I've stood next to the guy a couple of times, and I don't see how he is possibly that small. If you told me he was 6'3", 230, I would believe it. He is just physically, I've never seen a running back at this young an age that has that type of body. Now, obviously, just it's great for getting off the bus, but sure, you got to be able to perform and understand the offense and do all those other things. So we'll see what he can do, running the football and pass blocking and those other things that you've got to be able to do. So, but he's definitely going to get himself in the mix. I mean, they learned last year you got to have at least 3 guys at that position. They were using 4, and we're down. 3 of them were down in the Big 12 title game. They were on the number 4 guy, Desmond Jackson, whenever they're trying to win the game at the goal line in the Big 12 title game. So they have another one of those guys. I'm not trying to rip on Jackson, but maybe one of those other guys gets to the corner or makes a different play and they win that title game. You don't know what happens. So but my point is they know they've got to have depth because they've been through the situation where guys get banged up and those sorts of things. So they're working to really get those inexperienced guys up to speed at this point, so they can that they are comfortable running them out there on Saturdays.
Okay. And then as far as the receivers, a big loss, Tay Martin. So he's gone, 1,000-yard receiver. But Brennan Presley's back, and so's Blaine Green. And then a few other guys like Johnson and Owens, a couple of key recruits coming in as well. So is Presley the new number one guy? And what else? Who else should we be keeping an eye on? Who do you think could be breaking out this season?
It's a very interesting dynamic because they they did lose their main guy in Tay Martin that you mentioned, and across the board they feel like they're in a much better spot because so many true freshmen last year got a lot of valuable experience because they were down some guys. So they've got a lot of guys they're excited about. The thing with Presley is being an inside receiver. You go back through their history, you've got to go back to 2012, 2013 to find a time when an inside receiver led them in receiving. It was Josh Stewart, who had a great career at Oklahoma State. But ever since then, it's been an outside guy. So if I think Presley has the capability to be that guy to go get 7 catches a game and put up some good yards. At the same time, it just seems so comfortable for Spencer Sanders to find one of those outside guys, and the guy that out of all of them, and there's a lot of guys that are going to be impact players at the receiver position for this team, but the guy that's really standing out to me right now is Braden Johnson, a 6th-year senior, missed last year with an injury, and it led to a real sort of renaissance in his brain in terms of how much he cares about football. And you have seen him really take a huge step forward. He always had the athletic skill. He was always one of the fastest guys on the team, had all of those gifts, but something has clicked with him after missing last year and being away from the game for the first time in his life, essentially. Now he realizes how much it means to him, and he is just playing on a different level than we've ever seen from him before at this point. So it's been, I think he could be fun to watch.
Excellent, like it. All right, and by the way, what's their tight end situation look like?
It's a little bit in flux right now. Through about the middle of the season last year, Blaine Green, who was a true freshman and only weighed about 220 pounds, they moved him. They started playing him sort of as in a hybrid role. Sometimes he would line up as he was originally a slot receiver, and they started putting him in some blocking situations, more of an inline tight end or a fullback role, and line him up some different spots. He's about 230 now. The problem is he has injured his wrist, and it's a little unclear just how long he might be out at this point. So, they were really excited about what he brings to that spot because he gives them more of a vertical threat from that position. He was 3rd on the team in receiving yards last year as a true freshman. So you put him in that mix, and you've got a real good weapon at the tight end position, a guy that you're really comfortable flexing out, running in the slot, doing some different things. But if he's out for an extended period of time, they're in a different situation at that spot. Cassidy, who is a former defensive end who switched sides of the ball 3 years ago, and at that time he had never even caught a pass before. He had been an offensive line, defensive line guy his entire career in high school. So he has learned the position and is much better at it now than he was, and is a good physical blocker. But just a different type of guy in terms of the passing game than Blaine Green. So it's an interesting dynamic that they're dealing with right now, trying to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. Could be a lot of situations where you see 4 wide because they've got some other inside receivers that they're comfortable with, like John Paul Richardson, Brandon Press's little brother Braylon. So they've got that they won't be afraid to run out there and line up a couple of guys in the slot.
All right, and then wrapping up with the offensive line, and this is also a position that seems to be in flux. A couple of guys are gone. You have an injury in spring to update us on. So what's the offensive line looking like right now?
If you'd asked me in spring, it was disastrous. They didn't even have enough offensive linemen to have a traditional spring game at the end of spring. Because they only had 9 guys suited up, and one of them was only able to snap the ball in 7-on-7. So they had 8 able-bodied guys to run out there in spring because they had so many guys that were down with injuries. 4 guys with starting experience were out through the spring. So it made it rough in spring, but a lot of guys got some valuable experience. A guy like Caleb Etienne, who is a junior college transfer, he came in weighing 370 a little over a year ago, and is down to 325, and at 6'7" really looks the part of a big time left tackle. And that's where he feels he can step in and really help this program now. So you've got him slotting in there. Got some other guys that have changed positions. Preston Wilson has started 12 games in his career, played in over 20, but all of them at guard or tackle. Now they're moving him to center, and they feel that his knowledge is going to help kind of gel that unit together. Hunter Woodward is the most experienced guy of the group. He's going into his 3rd year as a starter at right guard. They're looking at a couple of other guys to really solidify that group. They had a very important transfer, Jason Brooks from Vanderbilt, who has come in, and if he's not starting, he's going to at least be a veteran guy that can go back up a lot of different positions if someone was to get hurt. So they're really excited about where they stand on the offensive line right now, in terms of where they were back in March and April.
Okay. So they haven't lost anybody then for a significant period of time.
Cole Birmingham was the one that got hurt during spring, and he's out for the year. He was a guy. He started at left tackle all of last season. So that was a painful loss there that will hurt them.
And you said Etienne will probably step up then into the left tackle?
He looks like the guy at left tackle, and he was the guy they were really excited about last year. He was battling for that left tackle job early in the season, but just wasn't in shape to go run the offense at the pace that they needed. And he had been at a JUCO that in 2020 they had moved their season back to spring, and then he opted out to avoid getting hurt. So he hadn't played football in a long time. So very interesting story, but he looks like he is ready to step in at left tackle.
All right. And by the way, the special teams, both kickers return. Do we know, is Brown going to be the place kicker again? Does Hale have a chance to win the job?
It's been a pretty good battle. Hale has, Hale was really good in 2020, struggled to start 2021. Brown comes in and has a really good year, 17 of 21. Looks like Brown is probably the front runner, but Hale has really improved and kind of gotten back to form. So that's been a pretty tight battle throughout camp.
All right, sounds good. By the way, are you doing any podcasts or anything like that, Scott?
Yes, we are. We're getting ready to get our podcast, the Cowboy Chronicles, fired up here later this week. So we go on a weekly basis once we get to games. So yeah, people can find us anywhere that you download podcasts, or I always tweet out all the information on Twitter at Scott Wright OK.
And by the way, that podcast is just an in-season podcast.
Yes, that's correct.
And so what is that? Is that just a weekly kind of during the season, or is it like a post game, or how does that work?
We do a midweek podcast. We're trying something new. We used to do a post game podcast. We're trying something new. We're going to try Twitter Spaces after in post game now try to interact with the fans a little more directly after games. So
that's cool.
Something new that we're going to be doing for post game, and see how it works.
Good luck with that. Good luck with the season. Hopefully it's an exciting season, just like it was last season. They don't come around very often. So
no, they don't.
No. So good luck with that. But look, they haven't made the playoffs yet, so there's still that goal to reach. And we'll see how it all goes. So Scott, appreciate it. Hopefully we get an opportunity to talk to you during the season.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.